Tonight, new ministers of health, education, and more. Premier Scott Moe announces a significant shuffle to his 18-member cabinet. Also, ground-penetrating radar reveals what English River Dene Nation says are 93 unmarked graves at the former Beauval Indian Residential School. Plus, as communities allow residents home to assess the damage from wildfires, there are growing calls for changes to how homes are built.
I still dream of the day when wildfire protection becomes part of the building code and a requirement for all the new homes going up all across Canada.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Tuesday, August 29th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening, and thank you for watching. Premier Scott Moe made some significant changes to his cabinet today. Two of the biggest ministries, health and education, have new ministers. The Premier also faced questions about the government's new pronoun and naming policy in schools. Adam Hunter has more.
Premier Scott Moe has done a late summer makeover of his cabinet. Most notably, Everett Hinley is in as Minister of Health, and Moe has moved Dustin Duncan from Education to Crown Investments. Duncan will take over for Don Morgan, who's been in cabinet for 16 years and is not running for re-election.
So with Don Morgan indicating that he's not going to run again, we need a very qualified and competent individual that has been around a while to take on much of that workload, and Minister Duncan most certainly is all of those.
In his final act as Education Minister, Duncan announced policy changes for schools. Specifically, they now must inform parents of a name and pronoun change if a child is under 16 and seek parental permission. Third-party groups are also no longer allowed to speak in sexual education classes. School divisions were not consulted before the changes. The School Boards Association says it wants the policies paused pending a review. But Moe says that's not going to happen.
We've been discussing this on behalf of the folks that we represent for a number of months, not just a number of weeks. And it is designed, as we say, to be an inclusive policy and to bring parents closer to their child's classroom.
The new Minister of Education says schools will have support for students who don't feel comfortable telling their parents about a name or pronoun change. But there are no details about what that means, except that parents need to be involved.
So if you have a child that is looking to transition, looking to identify by a different name or pronoun, that parent is, I think, in the best position to help support that child, not only just at school, but in all aspects of their life.
The opposition says the policies will endanger young people who may not feel safe.
Disappointing to see the new minister and the premier not back down from their changes, which we do know will hurt vulnerable kids in the classrooms. We've been clear from the start, and our position remains the same. This directive needs to be scrapped.
The government is also facing its first lawsuit in relation to this. The lawyers for UR Pride Centre wrote to Minister Cockrell. They say the policy violates the rights of gender-diverse students under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They say if it's not suspended by 5 o'clock Wednesday, legal action will begin. Adam Hunter, CBC News, Regina.
The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations says it intends to sue both the federal and Saskatchewan governments. It's alleging both are infringing on treaty rights through a handful of agreements that dictate land and resource ownership. A number of chiefs from First Nation communities in Saskatchewan and Alberta spoke at a news conference today. Most were in favor of the lawsuit. FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron says valuable resources like rare earth minerals don't belong to the government. He wants 25% of resource revenue to be shared with First Nation communities, similar to what SIGA gives the government from its casino revenue.
You divide, let's say, $100 billion. The provincial government industry makes $100 billion this year. Well, $25 billion to the our 74 First Nations. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of homes. That's a lot of investment that could improve the quality of life for First Nations, both on and off reserve.
Cameron says a statement of claim will likely be filed within 2 weeks. A warning first that this next story does contain distressing details. English River First Nation has found what it says are 93 unmarked graves at the former Beauval Indian Residential School's cemetery. That's 10 more than it announced 3 weeks ago. As Pratush Dayal reports, the First Nation says many of them are children.
English River First Nation says the 93 unmarked graves, 79 were children and 14 infants. Chief Jenny Wolverine says these are initial findings.
Let me be clear that this is not a finality. This is not a final number. It breaks my heart that there are likely more, or even that there's even one. The experience of residential school is horrific.
She says this impacts 16 communities in the Northwest who will need support, not just money, to move forward. Wolverine says Saskatchewan and Canada need to take responsibility.
Acknowledge that cultural genocide, dehumanization of First Nations and Métis cultures of the past. Putting words into action, have the political will to implement the calls to action. We have heard, I am sorry. Now we need to see action.
The ground-penetrating radar coordinator Dawn McIntyre says searchers took guidance from elders and survivors.
And this is based on the measurements of the soil disturbances that were detected by the GPR. We used a combination of GPR technology, geoscience, and archaeological expertise.
McIntyre says the search was based in and around the cemetery, which was used by the school until the 80s. The ground-penetrating radar detects changes in soil and provides a 3D image.
The advantage to what we did here being in an actual cemetery that did have some marked graves, they're able to compare and find that these unmarked graves are very consistent with the marked graves. So they look exactly the same.
The community wants culturally appropriate memorials installed and healing centers to address the ongoing harms of residential schools. FSIN Chief Bobby Cameron says the federal government should also release records and archives so communities can identify their relatives who never came home.
A lot of work to do. So Justin Trudeau, step up, be a man, look after and take the direction from English River and many other residential school sites across this country. Do the right thing. Do the honorable thing.
The community says the government should commit to reconciliation and listen to Indigenous communities. If not, Cameron is not ruling out legal action. Pratish Dayal, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Support is available for anyone affected by residential schools. You can call the 24-hour National Crisis Line for access to emotional and crisis referral services. The number is 1-866-925-4419. The city of Regina has recorded one of its deadliest months for drug overdoses in more than 5 years. The Board of Police Commissioners heard this morning that the city's police recorded 21 apparent overdose deaths in July. One of those suspected fatal overdoses was Elisa Tucanow, a mother of 4 who was living at a tent encampment outside Regina City Hall. There have been 94 apparent overdose deaths in 2023. That's the most since January of any year since 2018. The interim police chief says addressing overdose deaths is a complex issue.
It is a community challenge. This isn't something that police can do. I would say it's a health concern, and we really need everyone working together on this. We know in the community that we're struggling with having enough addiction supports in place. So I think that's really where it starts, is we need to start building that support.
Ray says the city is on track to set a deadly record this year, possibly the most overdose deaths since it began counting them 5 years ago. A new ruling from an Alberta judge has put almost 200 COVID convictions in question. Some Albertans found guilty of breaking the province's pandemic-related public health orders could see their fines returned. The judge ruled the province's health orders were invalid because they breached the Public Health Act. Politicians made the final decision on health restrictions instead of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, which isn't allowed under the Act. There are 14 cases still before the courts that could see acquittals or a stay of proceedings. A Canadian citizen is struggling to get his baby into Canada. He's had multiple rejections on his daughter's residency applications because of a mistake he made at the beginning of the process. As Ashwarya Dudo reports, he's fixed the errors, but says the system continues to push him away.
Even today, this application, I called them earlier today.
For months, Lincoln Sekipin has been anxiously waiting for his daughter's Canadian residency application to be approved. Sekipin's wife is a permanent resident in Canada. She gave birth to their daughter, Avira Muthu, in India, while she was on a trip visiting her parents. Nearly a year later, the couple is still living worlds apart. 3 of the baby's applications were rejected because consent forms were not included in the initial application.
Like right now, my wife can come to Canada because she's a permanent resident. She can come to Canada, and I am a Canadian citizen. I can go and come. But my kid doesn't have anything on it. So as a result, the only option we have is like we can abandon our kid in India by like an orphan. We can just leave it as it is.
After the first rejection, Sekipin uploaded the missing documents, but the application was rejected again. Sekipin says he called the Immigration Department's customer line for help and was told to submit a new application.
They are saying it's like the second application cannot be accepted because the previous application is inactive. But technically that application is not moving anywhere. The second one is not moving anywhere. So then I totally gave up.
We spoke to an immigration lawyer who says multiple factors are at play here. First, the parents did not follow the instructions properly, which led to the initial rejection. And now the Immigration Department can't seem to explain the next steps necessary for approval. Chris Veeman says it's not an easy process and says human error and now technical troubles are creating a lot of chaos.
I think the key is to figure out exactly what's going on with that resubmitted PR application, because it does seem like it's in the system. If they can get confirmation that that is the case, despite the letter that they got, that it's going to be processed, that's probably the first thing.
Veeman says the family may need professional help to finalize the application.
And staying with my friends is like, I don't want to stay lonely here.
Sekipin says he's frustrated, but he will keep trying, and he hopes he can celebrate his daughter's first birthday in Canada next month. Ashwarya Duda, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Edmonton's art scene just got a lot bigger, literally. This is the city's latest public mural and the biggest piece in Edmonton to date. At 20 stories, it's also the largest stencil mural ever created by a Canadian. Grady Wallace is a self-taught spray paint artist from BC, and he says the piece was years in the making. We'll be back after the break. This has been an unprecedented wildfire season right across the country, and it's not over. As communities tally the costs, more and more attention is focusing on what can be done to prevent wildfires from destroying homes. There are growing calls for changes to how homes are built. Kayla Hounsell has more.
This is all that's left of Alice Fisher's home, destroyed in the Nova Scotia wildfires back in May.
It talks about the flames traveling quickly.
She's been looking into options to build her new home better.
After living through what we've lived through and feeling that numbness.
This home has hardy board siding, and so if the fire approaches, this siding will not melt.
Paul Kovacs has been researching how to make homes fire resilient for 25 years. He says siding is just one part of it. People should also have fire resilient roofs and decks.
I still dream of the day when wildfire protection becomes part of the building code and a requirement for all the new homes going up all across Canada.
Canada does have a board responsible for national building codes. There's nothing in the codes to address wildfire protection right now. Climate change adaptation is a priority in the works, but the new codes won't be ready for another 2 years. In the meantime, there's nothing stopping provinces and territories from creating their own requirements.
This is the first time that we've had this many homes lost to a wildfire, and I really hope it's the last.
Pam Lovelace is the municipal councillor responsible for the Halifax district that lost 150 homes. She's asked staff to look at strategies to mitigate risk.
I think it's important for us to consider that. We don't know what the cost will be. We don't know if the materials are even available.
Kovacs says these measures generally cost between $5,000 and $10,000. After the fires in Lytton, BC 2 years ago, the federal government provided grants to homeowners building fire-resistant homes.
It's all about whether we want to pay a cost up front for all these fires, or do we want to be proactive and get ahead of it.
Fisher says she's considering it. Anything to provide a measure of safety after losing everything. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
This weather update is brought to you by Titan Automotive, proud member of the Capital Automotive Group.
And our weather specialist, Ethan Williams, joins me now, and wildfires continue to burn in Canada.
Yeah, that's right. And not far from us, too, of course, bringing in that forest fire smoke that we've been seeing through the province. And if we take a look now at where there's those air quality statements are in place, not much really has changed from yesterday. We saw a brief reprieve through central Saskatchewan earlier today, but those are back in place, all except for the Hudson Bay region. And right now, the Prince Albert area seeing the worst air quality, kind of in around that 10 out of 10 rating, but all of us sitting in that moderate to high rating right now. The heat also continuing through a lot of southern and central Saskatchewan, well over 30 degrees today. The Battlefords was actually the national hotspot for a period of time, sitting around 34, and we're still hovering around 30 at the moment. A little bit of instability now building in with that heat in southwestern Saskatchewan, and we're seeing severe thunderstorm warnings kind of up near the Alberta border from east of Maple Creek through to about Leader. And we do have some cells, one that just crossed the Trans-Canada east of Maple Creek, and a couple that are approaching the Leader area now, generally moving to the north and northeast, seeing nickel-sized hail, some pretty strong winds, and heavy rain with that moving through. And that is likely just a precursor for what we can expect tomorrow. This low pressure system begins to move in as high pressure moves out, and the warm front likely going to trigger a line of possibly severe thunderstorms through southern Saskatchewan, including in the Regina area as we head through the later afternoon hours tomorrow, and could create some heavier pockets of storms and showers as we head through the morning on Thursday in southeastern Saskatchewan, and then a cold front kind of moving through behind that. For the north, though, tomorrow, looking to avoid that for the most part. The severe weather going to be confined mostly to southern Saskatchewan, including Regina and kind of southeastern sections in south central Saskatchewan, Moose Jaw down to Assiniboia, Gravelbourg. Closer to the center of that low pressure system, we could also see some funnel clouds and maybe even some weak, brief, what they call land spout tornadoes. So we'll be keeping an eye on conditions there. And as that low moves in, those winds pick up overnight tonight and really through the day tomorrow. All of southern Saskatchewan seeing gusts in that 50 to potentially 60 range. And as that system pulls out on Thursday, though, gusts should be strongest to our south, but those gusts begin to shift from the south and southeast as opposed to from the north, and that is likely going to continue to move forest fire smoke out, but for northern Saskatchewan, that's likely going to be staying in place. And then as winds shift direction, these heavier plumes begin to move in as we head toward the end of the week, so something that we'll be watching there as well. For Regina, after we get through the storms, a big drop in temperatures as that cold front moves through, and likely going to leave us with showery conditions for Thursday. But starting September on a hot note, the weekend toasty through southern Saskatchewan before we see a drop-off in temperatures heading into the beginning of next week. Saskatoon may be some thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon for you, but mostly just looking for increasing cloudiness and looking for temperatures to stay warm as well, heading into even the beginning of next week too. So some hot temperatures here, Sam, over these next few days, but it looks like heading into that next week, first week of school, we start to feel more like fall.
All right. Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
It was a big day in the neighborhood of Sutherland in Saskatoon. The Saskatoon Fire Department opened a new station. Station number 5 at 1705 Preston Avenue North. It replaces the neighborhood's old Station 5 on Central Avenue, which was 56 years old. The move, which is about a 5-minute drive, was a result of a review of operations in 2014. The goal is to improve response times and service in a more effective way. Should be fully operational by mid-next month once all testing is complete. The former station will be decommissioned. We'll be back after the break.
When it comes to your news, you want up-to-the-minute access. Anytime, anywhere. Get the facts straight from the source. Download the free CBC News app or visit cbcnews.ca for news you can trust.
Welcome back. With many Canadians priced out of their local housing markets, some in the real estate industry say more people are looking to Edmonton as a place to invest. Naima Weingarten has more.
Welcome.
Thank you. So how much would a house like this be in, say, Toronto?
You're well over $2 million.
And how much is it here?
770,000.
Calvin Hexter works with real estate buyers and investors in the city. But lately, he's been seeing more and more clients out of province. Skyrocketing housing prices in Ontario and BC are making people realize their dream home might be one they'll rent out to somebody else. And a cheaper price tag is just one factor.
There's no PST, there's no land transfer tax. If you are looking at purchasing a property for the intent of investment and you're going to rent it out, there's a lot more favorable landlord rules versus tenant rules. So if you want to be a landlord here, it's a lot easier. If you want to be a landlord in one of the bigger cities like Toronto or Vancouver, way more difficult.
In Ontario, it could take more than 6 months to evict someone who isn't paying rent. But in Alberta, you could do it with a 2-week notice. There's also no rent control, and even building properties from scratch is easier out here.
It's so hard to build there. The timelines are crazy, and it's so expensive.
But with more out-of-province buyers, there's speculation over how it could influence the local market. Prices are already going up in Edmonton, but how much investors have to do with it is still up to debate.
The headlines that we're reading and all the conversations that we're having, saying those darn investors are, pushing everybody out. There's some argument for that in certain cities, but that isn't the norm. And it is not the case by any stretch with what's happening in Edmonton.
It increases the supply of rental housing, and there's always going to be a need, right? So people who can't afford to buy or can't, don't have the credit or just don't want to.
But whether or not prices are directly affected, the competition is.
Out-of-province investors or buyers are a lot more skilled at writing good offers than local Edmontonians. They're used to a seller's market. They're used to a market that is so hyper-competitive, and then they come here, we don't see the same level of competition.
But this trend doesn't have to mean out-of-province folks are taking over. These investments could translate into migration. People in the real estate industry I spoke to mentioned that a lot of their investors, especially young ones, eventually move out here to enjoy the lower cost of living and actually live in the house that they buy. Naima Weingarten, CBC News, Edmonton.
And Ethan's back with one last look at your weather.
And maybe a little bit hazy tomorrow morning in Regina, looking for a temperature of 19, but those southeast winds already picking up, and by the afternoon could be gusting close to 60 kilometers an hour. And reminder, there is the chance of an afternoon storm, some of which could become severe closer to the evening hours. Saskatoon a little breezy as well, with mainly sunny conditions, and warm again tomorrow afternoon, likely getting close to 30. A bit of increasing cloudiness, possibly some showers and thunderstorms in the afternoon, and a tad breezy as well. Now, all the smoke out there making the moon look pretty orange these days. Susan McDonald captured this shot in what is soon to be the second full supermoon of the month of August. We had one a little earlier this month, and Sam, this moon going to be closest to Earth tomorrow, so we'll hope for the skies to part, clear a little bit tomorrow evening to get more beautiful shots like this.
I just assumed it was the smoke.
Yes, exactly.
All right, thanks, Ethan.
You bet.
And that is it for us tonight. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/sask. Subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel, or head over and download the CBC News app. Ethan and I will be back with more local news and weather at 11. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.